WWNN Pompano Beach, WKIS HD3, Boca Raton, Miami, Fort Lauderdale. Download the iRadio Now app for iPhone or Android phones. Free at your iPhone App Store or Android App Market. Take AM 1470 WWNN with you wherever you go.
Attention to those of you who have a revocable living trust. When was the last time you had your trust reviewed? Trust should be reviewed every 2 years because the one thing in life that's constant is change. Situational change, financial change, even our closest relationships can change, and any changes not reflected in your trust will have to go through probate. Any change in beneficiary not reflected in your trust means your money's going to go to the wrong people. Attorney Barry Siegel will give you a complete, in-depth review of your trust to make sure it's up to date at no charge. Give Attorney Siegel a call, sit down with him, let him review your old trust. You'll sleep better at night knowing that your trust is up to date. Again, there is no charge for this service. Locations: Palm Beach to Miami. Call 1-855-FLA-3782. Tell them Steve sent you.
The opinions expressed on the following sponsored program are strictly those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors. Welcome to the Caregiver Reality Show with your hosts, David Levy and Paul Vadiato, who bring you more than a combined 25 years of practical experience, helping thousands of family caregivers, helping them find solutions to the challenges and frustrations presented by this important responsibility. So if you are in the position of caring for a spouse or a parent, a loved one who is no longer able to care for themselves, or if you know someone who is, this hour will be worth the listening. Now, let's tune in to today's edition of Caregiver Reality with your hosts, David Levy and Paul Vadiato.
Good evening, South Florida, America, and the world. This is the Caregiver Reality Hour. I'm your host, David Levy, and my co-host, Paul Vadiato.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, and want to let you know, for drive time listeners in the South Florida area, you can call us at 1-888-565-1470. Of course, you realize you're listening to us on WWNN 1470 AM. You can hear us around the country on iHeartRadio, and you can watch us live and streaming at caregiverreality.com. Just click on Live Show. We were hacked yesterday, but due to the good services of my producer's son, we got unhacked in a hurry, but when Freddie went online, it killed his computer. So anybody that had that problem, we apologize. It was nothing that we did. All right, we were merely the victims of a hack job. All right, Paul.
Hello, David.
But all right, I know how tough a week it's been. You know, mine looks like yours, and it's only Tuesday.
Yes. It's only Tuesday. We should have a double of Anison on the way.
All right. Anison, boy, I haven't heard that name mentioned.
I don't even think they're around anymore.
No, I don't think so.
All right, so give me your report. How's Suzette doing?
Well, Suzette isn't doing as well as I would have liked. She's doing fine with the knee, even though the knee hurts. That's what would have been expected, you know, from knee surgery. But her underlying condition, the dysautonomia, the thing that disconnects her automatic nervous system from everything else, is really not doing well, because when they took her off of everything, nobody realized, I did, but I couldn't do anything about it at that moment. Nobody realized what dysautonomia was really all about. Nobody really studies it. Nobody really knows it. There are a few experts. We spoke to the expert at the Medical College of Ohio in Toledo, a gentleman by the name of Dr. Blair Grubb. And even he has predicaments, because even though my wife is only 29, they don't have anybody that old with dysautonomia. And so her doctors, well-intended as they may be, don't recognize what is needed to do. So they called in Dr. David Levy, me, and I have been slowly bringing her up on the meds that have historically worked, doing it slowly, and hopefully in another week or two she'll be in a better shape, because right now she's very depressed, she's very sad, And if we didn't live on in a single-family house, she would jump out the slider.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound so good.
No. And your week, if you care to mention it.
Oh, this has been the round of Doctors Week. Unfortunately, many of Debbie's ongoing issues, be it mechanical or some derivation from the lupus, are starting to reappear. Same type of thing. She's feeling depressed, and she and I'm going to add me also. They're just scared. They're just scared about some of the symptoms that we're seeing and some of the tests that we know are coming up. And as we were talking before we went on air, sometimes you have a test and you get a result, but there's nothing they can do for it.
Right. And that's what happened essentially with us. Mm-hmm. And we're going on 15 years of being a dysautonomia caregiver. So if anybody wants to know what chronic illness caregiving is about, yes, I are one.
And we are not alone.
No, by no means. There's 50 to 60 million caregivers. We say it all the time. Those numbers are growing constantly. And every caregiver is a unique set of circumstances. Who they care for, how they care for them, what they know, who's helping to support them. And I constantly keep reading that get a support group, all right? That's fine if you even have one in your area. Last week we went and week ago Friday and shot another support group and why they're so beneficial. We posted,
filmed them, I hope.
Right. And we didn't shoot the caregivers, but we did film unscripted, live, unexpurgated, as it were, to show people why support groups are so important. And all the news coming down from AARP, there was a huge study this week, as you know, from the Rand Institute, Forbes, talking about caregiving in the workplace. And there is some really very uncomfortable statistics coming forward. And, you and I were talking just before the show got started about you went to get physical therapy today or yesterday. And the person that was giving it to you made the comment that...
Well, she was telling me that, she and her husband are really struggling. I mean, she's still paying loans off from school loans from becoming a physical therapist. Her mom is healthy now, but she knows she's not going to be healthy, is basically stuck in the house where she is, and she and her husband would like to move elsewhere, the physical therapist, but know that they really can't and leave Mom all by herself. And she says, we're sort of trapped where we are because we know what's coming down the road. And I think so many of us really feel we know what's coming down the road.
Right. And it's very difficult, And for those of you out there in the American hinterlands, we have a pretty good understanding of what's going on. And there was a great study that came out this week. I know I'm constantly mentioning studies, but I sit in a stream of information that keeps me up to date on what's going on in the world of caregiving, no matter where it may be. And this was related to rural caregiving, and we're really talking about rural, out where your next door neighbor may be a black bear or an elk. All right, and while they're great to see running across your backyard, they're not very good when it comes to being a support group. And there were a couple of comments that came out of this particular study, and one woman was living in a small cabin down a rut-filled long driveway without telephone or email when her husband was diagnosed with brain tumors. Luckily, her local hospital was large enough to tell her about available resources. Unluckily, she lived too far away to be served by any. A man with damaged kidneys who drove 100 miles round trip 3 times a week for dialysis, and many of us know that because we see what goes on here in South Florida. Dialysis, is pretty rampant. Anyway, they closed the center nearby, and he can't go to the other one that's even further away because he has to cross the county line, and the insurance, for some reason, won't cover it.
Hence the system, once
Yes.
again.
Right, trying to compete with the system out of your log cabin. Few retirement communities in rural areas, assisted living facilities, adult day services, home care agencies, or nursing homes exist in rural areas. So the choices a family might have in an urban center are simply not available. Those who may not be in the local area, what you hear is Florida thunder. If you can pick it up off the microphone, it was 87 degrees today, and we're about to get what we call a palmetto pounder. And so anyway, let me just finish up on this. Transportation's another major bell ringer in urban areas, rural areas, because bus and paratransit systems are usually absent in rural areas. Getting to the doctor or drugstore requires a car. In winter, these trips can be perilous, especially for older drivers, and 60 to 80 miles each way. When their car breaks down, they don't go.
And gasoline is about $4 a gallon.
Right. And rural areas offer few steady jobs for professional caregivers. So it really is a very perplexing problem. And when you look and see how much of this country is rural and do not have the resources that we have available in many urban areas, even though they may not be the best, to be without them altogether is not something that is something to be desired, and it's very tough. And I don't think that the formal healthcare system is going to be populating rural areas anytime soon, and I don't see going forward the availability of community-based resources and things that aren't hundreds of miles away. And so to the rural caregiver, we're going to try and pass on as much information as we can. You know, our website, caregiverreality.com, has a lot of useful information, and our collaborative partners, as you were, medicalresearchcharities.org, has a wealth of information from their underlying organizations on specific health and disease categories. So at least you can equip and acquaint yourself with the ailment that your loved one may be suffering from. But more importantly, then you can go to our site, because every disease has a caregiver, and we're here to support that caregiver. And it really doesn't make a difference what it is that you're taking care of, in the sense of what illness. What it takes to be a caregiver and how to do practical problem solving is a unique set of talents that we don't have, and unfortunately it's something that we need. And so going forward, I want to just mention real quickly, it's my 2 cents, that we released today the Family Caregiver Practical Problem Solving Manual for 2014. It's the update from the 2013 one that won the Florida Council on Aging Award, and we've added a lot more pieces to it. You're listening to us on WWNN 1470 AM. You want to speak to us? 1-888-565-1470. Back to you, Paul.
Well, you know, you were talking about the rural areas. Years ago, when you talked about caregiving, you were talking about people who lived and stayed nearby. But so much has changed as a society, where children, grandchildren are now moving away, and what had always been assumed to be there is not necessarily there any longer. And if you also go beyond that and think, well, we used to have the Ozzie and Harriet traditional families. The definition of family is so changed from what it was years ago. Who is it that we really can depend upon right now? And it's unfortunate that these discussions really are not held when everyone is healthy and they're really able to contribute their thoughts to it. Unfortunately, it happens in the moment of crisis, when decisions are typically not made at the best spot.
Right, absolutely. And, you know, as we go forward, one of the things that came out this week, the RAND organization, which is a huge think tank, they really addressed a lot of issues regarding the military, our heroes. And what they described it as hidden heroes, because what they were referring to were the caregivers for wounded warriors that have come home. And it really shocked me. I mean, I knew there were a lot. There are 5.2 million military caregivers, and over 1 million plus are dealing with post 9/11 individuals who were in Desert Storm, who went to Iraq, who were in Afghanistan, and it impacts the whole family. And one of the things that we're seeing a lot more of in those situations is mental illness, possibly caused by PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and issues such as traumatic brain injury from getting banged around in your Humvee because
IEDs
from the improvised explosive devices on the side of the road. And so this is very unique caregiving. And we're seeing it show up at age 25 and 30 when these wounded warriors come back from serving their first, second, third tour, and now they have wives that may or may not still be living on base. They may or may not have health care other than the VA, but their loved one may not have VA because they may no longer be active military, even though the VA is taking care of them. It doesn't extend down to the family. And if you can't pay for it, you can't pay for it, even if affordable care is offered. And the other thing is, the children of these wounded warriors and these family caregivers for the military are also de facto caregivers, whether they like it or not. They're pitching in either to help dad or mom or whoever was the active military person, as well as trying to help mom or dad, who's the caregiver, try and keep some semblance of order in the house and maintain their lives. And we've talked about that. Caregiving with young children around is a very difficult thing. And you find that many young caregivers get upset because their moms and dads can't be soccer moms and football dads because they're so devoted in having to take care of whoever it is they're taking care of. And so a lot of resentment, even though they're willing to do the job, they miss out an awful lot on a normal upbringing, no different than many children whose brother or sister or siblings have autism, have a birth defect, have some other issue that happened early in their lives, and they were caregivers for them, whether they liked it or not.
Well, David, you see on television, you read media and whatnot, they speak of the wounded warriors. They talk about the injuries. There is an awareness, and thank God they have these prosthetics now that work so well. Not so much with the mental illness, mental health issues that are out there. We don't really know as much about that, but clearly what they don't talk about at all is that family caregiver and the extended family caregiver. And, I don't know the statistics, and I don't know if it was in the report, but I imagine the divorce rate is quite high among those caregivers.
Well, amongst boomers and millennials, and millennials are really coming up to the plate in terms of caregiving and caregiving in the workplace. And because they're younger, and because they're assuming the responsibility for their spouses, their parents, maybe even their grandparents, what you're seeing is the other spouse of the millennial who may not be sick saying, hey, 38 years old, or 42 years old, we've been married 5 years, and my wife is just focused on her mother, and I love her dearly, but this isn't what I bargained for either. And if she's going to be totally focused on mom, then where's my life? I mean, I care a lot and I want to do what I can, but can I really put up with this at my prime time, so to speak? And it makes it very, very difficult. And so going forward, people think that all caregiving is elder care, and they're absolutely wrong. There's just as much caregiving going on at age 40 and 50 as there is caregiving for people who are 70 and 80 and in their early 90s. We've gotten caught up in cliches, and caregiving is elder care, and it is. And while you're just a leading edge boomer and your wife is younger than that, you're a perfect example. Yes, you did take care of your father.
Totally different.
But totally different than what you're doing for your wife. And so here I am at age 70, and I'm a spousal caregiver, but I've been doing it since I was 55. And so we are perfect examples, unfortunately, of the fact that caregiving does not have an age attached to it, and anybody that thinks they're going to escape it because they're young is very foolish.
Or old, or they have money, or they don't have money, or they live in the city, or they live out in the country. It's going to find you.
Right. You can be a survivalist, but you can't get around caregiving. Anyway, I think it's time for us to take a station break. You're listening to us on WWNN 1470 AM, on CaregiverReality.com, on iHeartRadio, and when we come back, you want to talk to us, 1-888-565-1470.
Are you a family caregiver? Are you taking care of a spouse or loved one who can no longer take care of himself or herself? Are you dealing with Alzheimer's disease and don't know what to do? Do you feel burned out, frustrated, and just don't know where to turn? You've tried doctors, lawyers, and mental health professionals and have come to realize that they don't have practical answers to these questions. What you need are experts, non-clinical family caregivers with 25 years of active experience helping thousands of family caregivers like yourself. People who can help you provide a better quality of life for yourself and your loved one. Who you need are David Levy or Paul Vadiato. Reach David at david@caregiverreality.com or reach Paul at caregiverreality.com and let them help you pick the right path towards improving the quality of life for you, the caregiver, and your loved one. This is Caregiver Reality with gerontologist David Levy and caregiver expert Paul Vadiato, who ask you to call in and speak with him on the air toll-free at 888-565-1470. That's 888-565-1470 to share a story or important information. Now, back to today's Caregiver Reality Show.
We're back, and Paul, you made a couple of comments while we were taking a break, points that you thought should be reiterated.
Yeah, I read the report. The RAND report was almost 300 pages, and it's a difficult read. There's an excellent executive summary that is attached to it, and there was some information within that was really troublesome to me, and I'd like to share it with our listening audience because it's really appalling. They were saying that 17% of civilian caregivers report spending more than 40 hours per week providing care, 8% reporting spending more than 80 hours a week, 12% of post-9/11 military caregivers and 10% of pre-9/11 military caregivers spent more than 40 hours a week. That's a full-time job.
Yes, it is. And it's a full-time, unpaid job, a full-time, thankless job, a full-time job, and especially for post-9/11, of trying to deal with not only emotional issues. I mean, we're not at the dementia stage, and we're not at the frailty stage that we think of when we think about elders. But these are young men and women who have issues that involve a pretty intense level of clinical care, wound care, medication management. The reporting services have been talking about it more and more. And nobody's educating that caregiver. I mean, the system, yes, we're dealing with it on the non-clinical caregiving side, but when it comes to these wounded warriors, they're coming home with a lot more physical trauma, all right, that needs to be addressed And it's happening at home. And yes, they may go to the VA, and certainly the VA is doing as good a job as it can, but the VA is swamped. I talk to people that are handling the greatest generation with the Veterans Administration. They're swamped.
Well,
And so to think that they've got the resources, time, and people to get down to, let's just say, the million plus that are post 9/11, it's at best a clinical response and little for the caregiver.
absolutely, and it spills over into the workplace. And I know we've spoken of this in the last few shows about how more and more caregiving is coming into the workplace, because as a caregiver, you don't leave that at the door as you sit down at the beginning of the day.
Plus, you need a job.
Well, you do have to put some food on the table. But in regards to this RAND report, they were saying that the caregivers for the post 9/11 wounded warriors, they're missing an average of 29 hours or 3.5 days of work each month. Now, I'm an employer, and I have an employee that is missing that kind of time. What is my reaction going to be?
Well, I'm not going to be happy, because if you add it up, that's 42 work days a year. And if we multiply it out by 8 hours, I'm not looking to do math for everybody, but we're looking at about 340 hours a year. And let's just say that individual is more than the $10.10 that they're proposing as a minimum wage. Take it as even $15 or $20 an hour times 350 or 360 hours. All right, now you're into $7,000, $8,000 a caregiver at a minimum, and now take it times 25% of your workforce. So you have 100 people in your workforce, and 25% are
Not there.
Are not there. All right, and so you got 25 people times $7,000 or $8,000, and people may not think that's a lot of money, but when you do the math, that's close to $250,000 in lost productivity just because of the time spent trying to do caregiving from the workplace without even addressing issues of not being there, absenteeism, burnout, other health-related issues. And so that's just taking time to care.
And we've spoken before, again, jobs are difficult to get today, and if you have two candidates who are equal, and again, while the law doesn't allow you to ask if you are a caregiver, should that come up in the conversation and there are two equal candidates, it's going to be very hard for that employer to choose the one that is a caregiver, knowing that there's going to be that loss of productivity and certainly the absenteeism that's associated with it. Above and beyond that, even the returning vets are having difficulty with the jobs because of the impact to the cost of the health care for the employer. So this is impacting a lot of the economics of our country as well as the politics of our country.
Absolutely. They were saying today, I was reading in the paper, how they're trying to push employers to hire the veterans that are coming back and those that are veterans from earlier wars and service issues, because they need to work as well. I don't think anybody for one moment thinks, unless they've got major disabilities, that there's anything, from the military that's going to carry you unless you've done your 20, 30 years and maybe have a pension. So then that's not your typical wounded warrior by any means.
And let's not forget, beyond the wounded warriors, how many Vietnam vets are still out there, and they are suffering both physical and mental issues that are either being under-addressed or not addressed at all. It's a tremendous problem.
Right. It's one thing when we talk about hidden heroes and wounded warriors, but I remember, because I was coming out of law school at the time, in the Vietnam era, the scorn, the distaste for a war that was unpopular, where people were giving up their lives, and yet when they would come down the street, people would spit at them. Where today you get cheers and claps when somebody has a uniform on and walks down a passageway in an airport. It was never that way. So on top of what illnesses and afflictions the Vietnam era vet had directly as a result of the war, they have had years of feeling that nobody appreciated what they did, and that kind of ostracism, that kind of criticism has a deep mental impact as well. And because of that, and because they have a tendency at times, and I'm not saying all by any means, but you see an awful lot of Vietnam-era veterans that are living in camps, you know, literally on the side of the road.
Many of our homeless.
Yes, are comprised of the Vietnam era. And that's very unfortunate, because they did as much as anybody else, even though politically, when we would see the little baby running, you know, from the napalm, the press really took everybody to task. But yet, they were there because their country asked them to serve, and maybe it was an unpopular time because it was the draft as opposed to an all-volunteer army. But yet, there was a reason for us to be there, and I'm not going to go into the politics any deeper than that. But in reading the Wall Street Journal today, I saw an ad, and I want to read it for the benefit of our listening audience. And you're listening to us on WWNN 1470 AM. And it was in the Help Wanted column, which is unusual for the Wall Street Journal. And it said, Help Wanted, informal family caregiver. Total responsibility for a family member or a loved one. 24 hours of work per day. On call 7 days per week, 52 weeks a year. No pay, no employee benefits, no training. Circumstances change daily, medically, emotionally, and practically. No vacations, no sick days, little to no time off. Job comes with a high stress level, strong possibility of depression and diminishment or loss of one's social and recreational life. Must be able to survive cognitive family caregiving. Have current knowledge of related legal, financial, and practical services and resources needed to cope with all potential circumstances of caregiving essentials. Extraordinary capability for patience. You must be able to constantly deal with guilt, anger, and resentment. The ability to find access and use the long-term healthcare system is a must. Constantly produce practical problem-solving solutions on demand. All skills learned on the job, by accident, luck, or basic intuition. Side benefits? Poor health, financial ruin, and loss of self-identity, and it can cause death. No terms are negotiable. Apply at your home, anywhere USA.
I mean, that really is
a help wanted ad for a caregiver.
For a caregiver. And you were talking about the airport and the soldiers, men and women coming back, and you hear thank you for your service. But what is not heard is to the caregiving family, thank you for your service, because these caregivers and their families, they're going through a lot.
Yes, they are. And
I think that ad really capsulized.
Well, you know, I wrote that ad about 8 or 9 years ago for a speech I was making, and it had such an impact that I have saved it and used it. I use it for boot camp. Caregiver boot camps when we run them, in order to make and impress upon people that that's exactly what a want ad would look like. And anybody that would sign up for that, you know, that's exactly what they're going to get. They may not get it from day one.
And David, our listeners should not listen to those that say otherwise, that it is not stressful, it's beneficial, it's an easy job, it's one that they should look forward to. Yes, we want to take care of the ones that we care about, but you cannot minimize the stress and the the impact on their lives as much as the loved one that's perhaps in the bed.
And when we do support groups, like tomorrow morning, the one we'll be doing in Del Rey at Grand Villa on Las Flores, if anybody wants to come, it's open to all. It's 9:30 to 11:30. There are a lot of spouses there, both men and women, who are very devoted to their spouse. And yet, you take a look at faces. I'm looking at yours, Paul, and I know how tough a week it was. You're looking at mine, and you know how tough a week it was. We wear our caregiving on our faces, and we can't help it, because that kind of constant strain and trying to figure out what to do next and how to deal with the system, and the fact in both of our cases that the medical profession may be doing the best they can, but they don't really know. They're guessing in many cases. They're trying to do their best. And in the meantime, we're dealing with the reality of what they can't solve. And I'm not saying that the medical profession can solve everybody's medical problem, but we have come to expect that the medical profession is going to lead us to greener pastures in terms of, the health of ourselves and our loved ones. And more that is not the case as we get into more and more complicated forms of illness and caregiving.
Well, I've been to 2 physicians this week, and both of them are specialists, and they, to their credit, they took a lot of time and they listened and they addressed questions that Debbie had. But no one turned to me and say, well, how are you doing?
Oh, I've never had anybody say that to me. They know what I do, and so they assume that because I'm a caregiver, educator, somewhat of an expert in the field, that I must self-intuitively take better care of myself. And when it's my wife, when it's my aunt and uncle long distance, even though now it's my aunt, it's just as complicated to do long distance caregiving, to do local caregiving, and on top of it all, I'm also the quarterback, but there's more professional detachment for all of those caregivers and families that rely upon you and me to be able to quarterback and help them see what they can't see, and to give them a perspective on what's coming up and how potentially to approach it and deal with it.
Well, you again, a good point. And
I have good points.
We don't see that, because in my own case, I've been so involved and intense with Debbie, I had neglected going to my own checkups, and I had a wake-up call, as you well know. A couple of weeks ago, I went to see the dermatologist, and what I thought was a little mold turned... Mold?
You're not that old yet for mold.
Sometimes I feel that I cough dust in the morning. But what I thought was just a little mole turned out to be a lot more than that, and thank God we got it in time. But it turned out to be surgery, and it turned out to be 13 stitches and a follow-up on that. And it was a reminder, because I thought I had been there the year before. It was 2009 since the last time I had gone for a checkup.
Right.
We tend not to put ourselves into that equation because we're so immersed in what we have to do day to day. And to our caregivers out there listening today, you have to put yourself ahead so that you can be there and be able to function in the role that you do. And not think of yourself as being selfish, but think of yourself as being a prudent caregiver, because absent you, the loved one that you're taking care of is going to be in real trouble.
Yep. And all the technology in the world and all the remote scanning and everything else does not take the place of a loved one near you when you have issues that technology just can't take care of. Like, I dropped the Kleenex box and I can't get it and I have to blow my nose. There isn't going to be a robot that runs over and picks it up and says, here. And while I may sound a little bit cynical and sarcastic, family caregiving is just that. 50 to 60 million people are doing it. Technology may come forward and give us assistance, but humans need to help take care of humans. And the more we see it, the more we recognize it. And Forbes, just to keep mentioning good names, had an article this week, and the headline was, "Caregiving is here to stay, and corporate America is not ready." Well, I certainly know that, and you certainly know that. Employers face a workforce in its prime caregiving years. Today, 7 out of 10 caregivers work full-time or part-time and represent between 50 and 30% of the U.S. labor force. Economic hard times have pushed the average retirement age from 57 in the 90s to 61 and rising, and in most cases, caregivers are staying in the workplace at least until 65 because they need a break even
Not
if
by
it's go
choice.
to work. Yeah, and those great you're going to retire and take your yacht to Tahiti. Well, okay, as long as you can put a hospital bed in it, have a full-time pharmacy.
And can do infusions.
Yeah, exactly. And so the American dream, which we have, for ourselves, our children, and our grandchildren, is still there. But one of the things that we have to recognize as part of the dream is the fact that we deal with realities in those dreams, and that caregiving and the fact that we have 50 to 60 million people doing it says, whoa, part of that dream has a very tough side to it, and it's not dreamy. And with all due respect, I'm seeing more and more books coming out on caregiving. That's how did celebrities take care of their loved ones? And I take nothing away.
It's a nice read
from any caregiver. But it's rather romanticized, and what a big name star with a big name wallet can do for their parent is very, very difficult than what somebody can do in a rural area, an urban area that doesn't have the money, can't even attract and maintain the resources even if they did have the money. And so I think that we do ourselves a disservice when we try and take caregiving and put the spin on it that it's just something that we have to do and it's going to be okay. There are some people that do caregiving for a loved one. They feel it's their calling, and in hindsight they always did a great job, and they probably did. But the greater part of the people that I meet and have over the last 26 years don't look at it as a walk in the park. It's a walk down a very dark trail, and there is no light at the end of the tunnel. Yes, death may take you out of the equation of being a caregiver, but on the path to that, it's all those twists and turns and those roots sticking up that we can't see, that we stumble over and fall, and it's not pleasant. But we all have to be aware that one day somebody's going to tap us on the shoulder and say, guess what? You're a caregiver starting today.
Or a caregiver again.
Yes, a caregiver again. And that was another piece of information that now we're starting to see more and more coming out of the press and the media and these reports, is the amount of caregivers that are doing it again. The March 2014 statistics on how many employed there were in the workplace was about 156 million, and actually maybe 145 million, because there's 10 million that want to work but can't. That's our 6 to 7% of the unemployed. So if you start looking at numbers in the workplace, all right, that run between 15 and 30%, you're looking at 23 to 40 million caregivers. The numbers can't be that precise, but we know that when we have 50 to 60 million caregivers, there can't be much more than 10 or 15 million that are no longer employed, that are doing caregiving and beyond the age of employment. That's a very significant amount of people, and especially if you do the math.
Oh, sure. And, we spoke about men and women coming out of the service, and I know in the past we've spoken about Alzheimer's, dementia, the older folks. There are many in their 40s that are caregiving two ways. They have parents that they're caring for, but they also have children that are returning back to the nest, and they have issues that need to be addressed.
Those kids, and you're absolutely right, whether they're returning or whether or not they're saying, help keep me in college, I need to go to graduate school, can you help get me started on my first apartment so that I can go take advantage of a job? And parents want to do for their children what they can, and to then be conflicted with trying to do your best as a parent and then trying to do the best you can for your parent is a big issue. And Pew Research, PEW, who is a constant source of great information, made a comment the other day that said it isn't just a boomer issue. 42% of Gen Xers are sandwich generation caregivers, caught between, as you said, raising their own kids and caring for somebody. Caring for children still at home and aging parents simultaneously, or a spouse. Because let's face it, all those post 9/11 hidden heroes are sandwich generation, whether they like it or not, or sandwich caregivers. And that's a much higher percentage than their boomer counterpart, the 42% of Gen Xers, than the 33% of boomers. And so we are coming into, or as Pew said, we're at the tipping point where employees are more concerned about elder care than they are about child care. And unfortunately, child care appears to be the predominant employee assistance program when we use the word care. It's about 5:45 where we are, Paul, and we need to take one more station break. You're listening to us on WWNN 1470 AM, on CareGiverReality.com, iHeartRadio, and we're at 1-888-565-1470. Call if you'd like.
Are you a family caregiver? Are you taking care of a spouse or loved one who can no longer take care of himself or herself? Are you dealing with Alzheimer's disease and don't know what to do? Do you feel burned out, frustrated, and just don't know where to turn? You've tried doctors, lawyers, and mental health professionals and have come to realize that they don't have practical answers to these questions. What you need are experts, non-clinical family caregivers with 25 years of active experience helping thousands of family caregivers like yourself. People who can help you provide a better quality of life for yourself and your loved one. Who you need are David Levy or Paul Vadiato. Reach David at david@caregiverreality.com or reach Paul at caregiverreality.com and let them help you pick the right path towards improving the quality of life for you, the caregiver, and your loved one. This is Caregiver Reality with gerontologist David Levy and caregiver expert Paul Vadiato, who ask you to call in and speak with him on the air toll-free at 888-565-1470. That's 888-565-1470 to share a story or important information. Now, back to today's Caregiver Reality Show.
You know, not earlier this week, the end of last week, when I was talking with the CEO of Medical Research Charities, who watches all of our shows, as well as we're linked to them on their medicalresearchcharities.org website, and they're about to do a big social media blast concerning us and them and the kind of research organizations that are a part of what they do. And he said, I really like when you give out interesting little tips about caregiving. So tonight I thought I would pick on a couple and see how they play. For those of you that are dealing with loved ones with dementia, whether that's Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, temporal frontal lobe, whatever it may be, and find that you're having a hard time getting your loved one to eat. I'm not saying that they've reached the point where they can't even hold the fork any longer, but before that, one of the most amazing things, and it works in a significant percentage of time, is try feeding them on a red plate. There's something about a red plate, and yesterday I was with a gentleman who is a professional chef, and he said when he was going to culinary school, he said the two best colors to put food on were black and red. And so over the years, as I've given out the red plate theory to caregivers, and I say, you don't have to get crazy over it. Go on over to Kmart or Walmart and buy some red plastic plates.
So what happened to the blue plate special?
Well, that's only at the diner. That's not at the caregiver's house. But it's a very interesting phenomena. Also, when they're reluctant to take a shower, many times it's because the bath mat that's in the shower, assuming that you haven't gone to a safety chair or something like that, is the same color as the tile in the bottom or the ceramic in the bottom of your tub. If you go to a more heavily contrasted, if you have a white tub and you put a blue mat down, you may find that you have far greater success in getting somebody to step into the shower because it doesn't look like one big blank spot. And you can say to them, come on, we're going to go stand over here on the blue, and if they don't know blue, we're going to stand on this darker spot because it's a safe place for us to stand. So for those of you having difficulty, and even difficulty in getting someone into the shower, and many people have to get in the shower with their loved ones in order to get them into the shower, but you might find that the darker bath mat does help. I'm going to give you a story that was a remarkable one, and it happened a few years back with a much older woman who was a Holocaust victim who lived in a retirement community that had a nearby railroad track. And at night, as her dementia progressed, she would hear the train. And she was unfortunately one of those people that was herded away in a cattle car on a train. So trains were always very problematic for her. And she always imagined that the train was coming to her front door, was going to crash through, and that they were going to load her on the train. And this went on for a period of time, and everybody took a shot at trying to convince her that it wasn't there, but we couldn't. And one day it dawned on me and somebody else that I was working with that what do you use to stop a train? A red lantern.
That's right.
All right.
Yeah.
So we went out and we bought a little red lantern, and we went back to her home, back to where she lived near the railroad tracks, and we said, look, we have bought this red lantern, and when you have a red lantern, all trains have to stop, and so they can't come crashing through your door. You do not have to stay awake all night waiting for that to happen. Within 2 days of having the lantern hanging there, she started to sleep. And after a short period of time, we went and told her that they're not using lanterns anymore. They're using these big red reflectors that you could buy at the auto store that had a sticky back on it way back when that you used to put on your car for additional safety. And we did that. We never had a problem with that again. And so there are unusual but practical solutions sometimes. You got to think out of the box.
Practical problem solving.
Absolutely. And, as I said, here we are once again with the Practical Problem Solving Workbook. It's the 2014 version. We updated it from the one that won the Florida Council on Aging Award. And it's got even more tips and techniques and how you plan as a caregiver. Almost all of the research coming down and the individual folks that comment on a lot of this, Sally Abrams from the AARP, Amy Doyer who writes for them, you gotta have a plan. And you can't just open up and Google caregiver plan because it's too unique. It's your road trip, all right? And if you don't understand all the things you need to do in order to get from here to there, especially when there isn't a light at the end of the tunnel, I would highly recommend that you pick up a copy of the book. All right, it's available on our website at a very nominal price, but I think I was told by our editor, starting a week from tomorrow, it's been on Kindle, but we go into that countdown where for a week or whatever it is, and each successive week for 3 weeks, we drop the price down, I think, to $2.95. Then it goes to $4.95, $6.95, and then back to $8.99.
What a great opportunity.
For $2.99, which is not even a serious latte at Starbucks, you can have this on your e-reader now and forever to share with your friends. And I think you will find that even if you get a few tips, a few techniques, a couple of things that point you in the right direction, it will well be worth a large hamburger from Burger King. And I don't think that you can get more information that's more pointed at the family caregiver and from a non-clinical perspective than this book. I know I may sound self-serving, but I know the 26 years that preceded putting that book together and everything that we learned, and even since we put it together.
Well, one of the nice things...
There's been a whole bunch of new changes.
Sure. One of the nice things about Kindle is if they go, they can look at the book, they can get selections, look at the table of contents, read a couple of pages within it, and get to see the actual value in it, and it's just invaluable.
Right, and there's no picture of me on the flyleaf. So you won't be scared away.
So it is safe for children.
It is safe for children and older people and dogs.
You know, David, just before we leave, you were talking about showering before, and
right. It's something I do every Saturday.
Well, I should hope so. But I did want to just reiterate how important it is that when we have loved ones who are frail or with Alzheimer's or some sort of cognitive impairment, that you have the appropriate grab bars within those showers, and they're appropriate to the person. They're not just arbitrarily placed wherever it may be. So many falls occur within the bathroom, so many falls occur within that shower, and so many people don't have them in place.
And don't for 1 minute think that your towel rack or your soap dish handle
no way
is going to be the equivalent of a well-installed safety bar. And Paul, you're 100% correct. And for all of you out there with a loved one that needs your assistance in bathing or showering, a bath chair is invaluable. They have bars that, if you want to use the shower, allow somebody, they clamp right onto the edge of the shower, and so that you can use those as they step over. And there's a wealth of inexpensive ways to deal with these kinds of issues. And I also want to remind everybody that a wheelchair, a cane, a walker does not have to be, not everybody has Medicare and can get it paid for. Go to a local consignment store. It's one of the things that people give away as soon as the loved one that needed it no longer needs it. And it doesn't cost a lot of money for you to pick these things up so that you can have a safer environment for your loved one. I mean, that's my big tip and takeaway. I see by the clock on the wall and Freddie's hand that we have about a minute left. I want to wish all of our Jewish listeners who are on their way home a very happy, prosperous, and healthy Passover. And for those of you that aren't, a very happy, healthy, and prosperous Tuesday. And
Good Friday coming up.
Good Friday coming up.
And Easter Sunday.
Can't wait for the Easter egg hunt and getting my chocolate bunny. And there's nothing I look forward to more than that, and seeing all that green stuff strewn around the house by my grandchildren.
Got to watch out for those little chicks.
Yep. Oh, those little chicks will kill you. And so, South Florida, America, and the world, you're listening to the Caregiver Reality Hour. We only got another 30 seconds. Paul, why don't you do the sign-off, and we'll see you again next Tuesday.
Absolutely. Have a great week, everyone. If you have any questions, go to the website, ask the questions, and we'll be sure to get them on air. Have a great week. Thank you.
Night.
Thanks for joining us for this week's Caregiver Reality Show. Each week, David Levy, a gerontologist, and Paul Vadiato, a caregiver expert with a combined over 25 years of experience, providing practical and realistic help to caregivers struggling to keep up with the needs of a loved one who are unable to care for himself or herself. To reach David Levy, email him at david@caregiverreality.com. Or to reach Paul Vadiato, email paul@caregiverreality.com. And find out more online. Just go to caregiverreality.com. See you next week for another exciting show of Caregiver Reality. The opinions expressed on the preceding sponsored program were strictly those of its hosts, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of the station, its staff,